One of the most prominent things that one of these pro-vaxxers will say is that we had a very short lifespan before science. This is something that needs to be addressed from an alternative viewpoint because there's many variables to consider. Well, to start off, many ancient cultures, myths, and legends refer to many different ages of the human race. You have the Golden Age, then you have that age getting corrupted and then the flood coming. Then you have this rise of awareness, the Aryan Age, the Tartaria Age of Noble Ones. And then after you have this destruction of fire that then leads to the restructuring of the modern age. So, for most of the people who are pro-science and pro-vax, they're also following the mainstream history, which again says that we came from monkeys out of Africa and that the ancients did not have a long lifespan in general. In order to understand why we do not need to rely on science or political science really, is that there were ages in our past where we lived in great health and had extremely long lifetimes. There's no proof, we would have evidence in the fossil record. Well, there are many cases in which artifacts do not fit the mainstream narrative, and are forced into a specific history rather than truly discovering its origins. That's because corruption has infiltrated almost every industry. It's absolutely unbelievable, and 2020 was the year to see it clearly. We all know that science and education has become extremely political. It's the exact same thing with history, and many well-known historical events have either been presented in only a certain light and or edited to fit the winner. The Bible makes it clear that early humans had long lifespans and lived to be up to 800 years old in some cases. Not saying everything in the Bible is completely factual, but there are many books from that age that describe humans with extremely long lifespans, comparing to now. Many ancient writers make it clear that early ancient advanced civilizations, such as the Hyperboreans, had a very light diet that did not consist of eating animals. Remember, this whole perspective that we are meat eaters comes from this cosmological perspective that we were hunter-gatherers and we had to fight to survive. Those were simply stages after cataclysm where advanced civilization fell into chaos. Greek historian and philosopher Hellenicus claimed that the Hyperboreans, Celts, were a very just people living on acorns and fruit with no partaking of meat. Quote, "When I go back," says Higgins in Anacalypsis, page 147, "to the most remote periods of antiquity which it is possible to penetrate, I find it clear and positive evidence of several important facts. First, no animal food was eaten, no animals were sacrificed. Origins has left us with the record that the Egyptians would prefer to die rather than become guilty of the crime of eating any kind of flesh. Herodotus tells us that the Egyptians subsisted of fruits and vegetables, which they ate raw. Plinius confirms the statement. Harold Wrightstone in The Private Lives of the Romans says, quote, "Of the Romans, it may be said that during the early republic, perhaps almost through the 2nd century BC, they cared little for the pleasures of the table. They lived frugally and ate sparingly. They were almost strict vegetarians. Much of their food was eaten cold, and the utmost simplicity characterized the cooking and the service of their meals." Could this be a time in Rome before Cataclysm and before the Phoenicians came into the cities with their stink and bad health habits? The oldest inhabitants of Greece, the Pelasgians, who came before the Dorian, Ionian, and Elean migrations, inhabited Arcadia and Thessaly, possessing the islands of Lesbos and Lake Manas, which were full of orange groves. The people with their diet of dates and oranges lived on average of more than 200 years. This is confirmed by other Greek poets. Hesiod said, quote, "The Pelasgians and the people who came after them in Greece ate fruits of the virgin forest and blackberries from the fields." Plutarch, the Greek biographer, observed, quote, "The ancient Greeks before the time of Lycurgus ate nothing but fruits." Hesiod, one of the earliest Greek poets, often called the father of Greek didactic poetry, spoke of a fallen golden race who once lived like the gods. First of all, the deathless gods who dwell on Olympus made a golden race of mortal men who lived in the time of Kronos, when he was reigning in heaven, and they lived like gods without sorrow of heart, remote and free from toil and grief. Miserable age rested not on them, but with legs and arms never falling, they made merry with feasting beyond the reach of all evils. When they died, it was as though they were overcome with sleep, and they had all good things, for the fruitful earth unforced bare them fruit abundantly and without stint. They dwelt in ease and peace upon their lands with many good things, rich in flocks and loved by the blessed gods. This golden race descends spiritually and physically lesser each age. Plato, in the second book of the Republic, Socrates develops his idea of the diet best adapted to the general community. The work people will live, I suppose, on barley and wheat, baking cakes of the meal and kneading loaves of the flour, and spreading these excellent cakes and loaving upon mats of straw or upon clean leaves, and themselves reclining upon rude beds of yew or myrtle boughs. They will make merry themselves and their children, drinking their wine, weaving garlands, and singing the praises of the gods, enjoying one another's society, and not begetting children beyond their means through a prudent fear of poverty or war. We shall also set before them a dessert, I imagine, figs, peas, and beans. They may roast myrtle berries and beech nuts at the fire, taking wine with their fruit in great moderation, and thus passing their days in tranquility and sound health. They will, in all probability, live to a very advanced age, and dying, bequeath to their children a life in which their own will be reproduced. Then, Socrates proceeds to point out how the new ideal republic will become plunged into injustice and violence and fall into decay just as soon as it oversteps the limits of necessaries and makes the flesh diet and the acquisition of wealth objects of supreme endeavor. By this extension of our inquiry, we shall perhaps discover how it is that injustice takes root in our cities. If you also contemplate a city that is suffering from inflammation, whose people have been departed from simplicity, they will not be satisfied, it seems, with the mode of life we have described, but most have in addition couches and tables and every other show article of furniture, as well as meats and viands. We shall need swine herds for such a city, and great quantities of all kind of cattle for those who may wish to eat them, then decline and decay. Does this not seem relevant to what's happening in our society today? Ovid remarks that Plato, doubtless, reached his great age because of his moral purity, temperance, and natural food diet of herbs, berries, nuts, grains, and the wild plants of the mountains, which the earth, the best of the mothers, produces. Pythagoras, alas, what wickedness to swallow flesh into our own flesh, to fatten our greedy bodies by cramming in other bodies, to have one living creature fed by the death of another. Leonardo da Vinci, quote, "Truly man is the king of beasts, for his brutality exceeds theirs. We live by the death of others. We are burial places. I have from an early age abjured the use of meat, and the time will come when men such as I will look on the murder of animals as they now look on the murder of men." Nikola Tesla, quote, "It is certainly preferable to raise vegetables, and I think therefore that vegetarianism is a commendable departure from the established barbarous habit. That we can subsist on plant food and perform our work even to advantage is not a theory, but a well-demonstrated fact." Well, we all know about this and people joke about it all the time. I don't know what's true, and this is not to be presented as fact, but to simply ask questions. What are the implications of global forced vaccination with passports, and how does it represent the end of liberty and alternative health? Is more dependence on government a good thing? Are banks and culture moving to a more virtual and trackable currency? Have there been talks of a microchip, or something that may be implanted into the body in the future and possibly be mandated by the government? Is it possible that the one world religion of the new world will be political science? In this new modern ideological war, do you trust the science? Many people sometimes get angry when hearing this information. They begin to think about how messed up the world is and start to have a feeling of despair. We must never give in to despair and always have hope. I think the solution and answer is to just keep spreading awareness. Share this video, start talking to people about these subjects, and to really just stay curious about questioning the world we live in. The goal is to keep individualism and conservatism alive. I'm not saying to vote or fall into the trap of the polarized far political right. Be aware of the political battlefield of ideologies. Hopefully balance yourself as a libertarian and promote the concept of liberty, individual rights, a free market, and to keep government from getting too powerful or Orwellian. For as long as this ideology lives, it will always be a threat to a tyrannical society. Wish everyone the best, and all I can hope is that our minds may be unveiled.